So record keeping and programs are extremely important. And why is accurate keeping vital in our daily work? For there's so many reasons, right? We are provided with funds from different agencies to support our programs, and in order for us to show how we do these expenditures every month, every year, um, we have to maintain good records, and it starts from every single entity of your program, your children's record, your staff records, your CACFP records, your all of your purchases and expenditures, even as far as your food, CACFP. So all these regulatory agencies has the right to actually come and audit your site, and so that's why record keeping is so important. You have to be accountable for every single penny that is given to you to run your sites. So, as we put here, it's to make informed decisions, allocate resources wisely. You're not going to overspend. If you have a budget for your school supplies, you have to make sure that you maintain that budget so that you don't over exceed the fundings, because if you take it from somewhere else, you may not be able to support that other entity that you're doing. For example, your salaries, your bills that you have to pay, your insurance, everything that comes with your expenditures. You have to try to keep everything allocated in its place and make sure that you're not overspending, and also to ensure compliance. We're regulated by the Department of Education. DOHMH comes and regulates our programs. And so does CACFP. We also may have to maintain records for the buildings department, and for the fire department. So it's a lot of regulatory, even though they do not, the buildings department and the fire department does not give us funds, we still are accountable for making sure that our buildings are maintained in good work order, as well as um, everything is running in its place the way we're mandated to do. So even as far as your fire drills, how do you maintain that? How do you maintain fire drills? How do you do your evacuations if need to be done? All of these things need to be in place. So that is part of the record keeping, because when the fire department comes out to you, they're going to see your fire drills. They're going to see if you did, when you did it, how many children were in the site, how many adults were in the site, and how long did it take you to evacuate the site. So please be very conscious of that. Always do a fire drill at least once a month. It not only is because obviously it's what it's mandated for us, but we also want our children to be safe at every given time. So doing a monthly fire drill really supports the children, because they get used to it. They may cry at the beginning, but they get used to evacuating and going. And what are the procedures? Are you crossing the street with the children? Are you going down the block? All of these things are extremely important. So, like I mentioned, um, everyone that gives you funding has the right to audit. And what do these audit look like? There are many processes that you have to follow in order to show that you are following. So you have to maintain your records up to date. It's good practice to do your monthly expenditures, and making sure that all the bills that you pay on a monthly basis, that you put it in one folder, so that when you go back at and you're asked for a certain receipt, and they'll tell you it was in the month of May. You go to your May folder and you just get it from there. If you maintain everything cluttered together, in order to find these receipts can be very difficult. So the way that we did it was that we maintain a folder from July 1st through June 30th, right? So it started July, August, September, October, November, December through June 30th. That's the whole fiscal year. Everything that was allocated for anything that was paid, anything that was purchased in that given month that you made payment and that you purchase it, then you put it in that folder. And it becomes very good practice, because when your auditor reviews you and they ask you, what did you spend during the course of the summer, then when we're given all this money to spend, right? I don't know if you per se have been given money, but DOE has a tendency of giving us some, especially now during the new programs that just started in 2021, I believe. When the new contract was awarded, they gave us spent money to for the improvement of the program, for purchasing of classroom equipment, purchasing of materials for both the classrooms, offices, and kitchen. So all of that you're accountable for, and you have to maintain it in a good, proper order. And separate it. Separate your within that month of June. You could do your classroom. You could do your purchases for other expenditures other than the classroom, and then you have your CACFP. We'll get into how to do these things later on, but it's just an overview. Also, we as program directors, and having accountability for this money that we are given on a yearly basis, we have to maintain these records for 7 years. So, in maintaining these records, it can be quite confusing if you're not organized. So, what we used to do is we used to put in a box, those file boxes that come for you to save records. We used to allocate all of the children's folders that were for that one fiscal year. Usually, what I did, I used to keep the last fiscal year, like for example, last fiscal year, I would keep the folders through the end of this fiscal year, right? Because if somebody came to question me about the children's record, I had it easily accessible. But then after the year is up, I would put it in the box that my bookkeeper would put together with everything that it had to do with that fiscal year. And then we would label it. We would indicate every single item, like all the expenditures, the CACFP, children's record. Staff record is different. Staff records I always maintain in my office, because staff records, it could be something that people will come readily to ask you for, right? And also make sure that you keep this in very secure places. They have very um, private information, medicals, social security numbers of the children and the families. And addresses. So you have to make sure that you maintain this in a place where it's secure. And now with all these floods that we're having, also, right? We have to maintain them in a safe place where they don't get destroyed, because we're responsible for 7 years of records. And even though we do use the computer to keep some of these records, it's not everything that we do. You need hard copies of these things. So please keep that in mind, that you put it in a secure place. And then if you allocate a closet and you buy shelves that are high and you start packing them up year by year, you'll have them. And then also make sure at the end of the seventh year that if whatever your agency really dictates to you, because some people like to keep it even more time, then you got to make sure that every single document is shredded and destroyed properly, that you don't have any information out there in the garbage that anybody can go into and take. Okay, now I'm going to go over children's record and what that may entail. So, in your children's record, you have to keep every single document that you did during your enrollment process, right? Everything that you gave the parents, everything that they signed, everything, um, as well as the children's medical, right? Because their assessment, their progress report, everything. Now, medicals. This is extremely important for medicals. Your medical records have to be kept in a place also where it's secured and locked. Medical records should have every child's immunization up to date. Please make sure, even as far as I know that they said the lead poisoning, the lead risk assessment, and the risk assessment, that it didn't have to be done, but it does have to be done. At least one in the back of the medical, it says lead risk assessment, and then it says lead blood tests. Lots of doctors don't want to do this, but we were mandated by the DOHMH that children need to have this, at least one proof of this, that the lead is below a certain level per, according to what the DOHMH mandates for the children. So you should have that. And let me tell you something about medicals. The medicals, if you have a child who has been injured in your program and you had to take that child to the hospital, you are responsible for keeping those records until the child is 18 years of age. Not that doesn't apply for the 7-year rule. If that child was transported to a hospital, and because remember, anybody can then come back and potentially sue you. So you have to make sure that you keep all your records, everything, all the process that we already addressed in the past about what to do when you claim when a child gets hurt, that you have to report it to the DOHMH, you have to report it to DOE, you have to report it to your sponsoring board. Any document that went along with that, anything that was sent to you by the hospital, you have to keep it in that child's records for 18 years. You cannot discard that. So that's something to keep in mind. Staff records are also extremely important to keep. And the staff record is in the entire hiring process. um, a copy of their official transcript, identical, the letters of references, um, their medicals, resume. Now, I'm gonna share with you how I kept. I had a system for my children's record. This is what I used to do. I had a folder that encompasses everything from DOE now, that's the agency that we're accountable to, as well as DOH. I have those records separate in two folders within a folder. All of the paperwork that we did during the intake, all of those records. And then I kept another one for the medical records. And the reason why I did that is because it's easy if you're looking for a child's medical, because sometimes they only come to assess your medicals. You could just pull out the medical and have it. Then what I used to do is at the end of each fiscal year, I would review every single child's medical, right? Every single one. And then I would see when that child's medical was due. But you have to be extremely careful because the due date on the form exactly doesn't necessarily reflect what is on the medical itself. So the hearing and vision could have been done maybe in April, right? of the previous year, but the medical is due in July. So you have to make sure that the hearing, the vision, the dental, all of their shots are up to date, as well as the date that's on the medical, because we can take children's records from the parents within that fiscal year, right? That calendar year. So some of those things may expire. So you might have accepted a child in July, but the medical was done in April. So then the next April in 2024, now that medical is due. So this is what I used to do. I used to do, I would put a folder in front of every class, and I would put a running list of all the children in in that class, and I would put when the medical was due. Also, I would put if they had immunizations that were due within that calendar year, I would put those too. Remember, when you do your survey for your immunization survey for the city, you're accountable to give those that report who has all their shots. So that's very easy. If you have this, and I had a whole big spreadsheet. It was called an immunization record, and that was provided to us by the people who conducted this survey on an annual basis. I used to keep that on the computer, and every time I made a change on a monthly basis, I would update it, right? So when that survey comes around, I believe it's either April or May that you have to submit it. You have everything up to date, and you don't have to go scrambling asking the mothers to complete the medical before this date that your survey is due. So just keep that in mind, that you always have to have those things up to date, and develop a system. It doesn't have to be my system, it could be a system that works best for you. And you may have one in place. Just make sure that if you're maintaining it, that's fine. But if somebody else is maintaining it, that, for example, an assistant bookkeeper or your bookkeeper, if they're the ones who are maintaining it, that they're actually doing it. You should review it at least every month, or every every other month, so that it's up to date, so that you don't have to go back one fiscal year to make sure that you have this. And then what I did in the medical record for the children, I always put their name. I always put the date of entry and their birthday. That was the first page. Then I would have their updated medical, right? And then anything that we provided to them, for example, if they had an asthma action plan, if they were asthmatic, and that was something that was required for us to gather from the parents. If they have allergies, that was part of their medical as well. um, their 318K form, the one that gives us the right to have the children be taken to the hospital in the event that there is an extreme emergency and we have to transport that child by ambulance to the hospital. So that was all part of their medical record. And it's important for you to keep that 318 Form K there, because when you transport a child to a hospital that requires medical attention, that gives you you're representing the parent, and the parent has given you that right to do so, with the knowledge of knowing that you're going to communicate to that parent as soon as possible what happened to the child and where that parent should be meeting you. And so you hand this over to the doctor with his medical history, so that the doctor knows exactly what, if children have asthma, if they have a blood disorder, whatever it is that the doctor put in that medical, they have to be privy to it because the parent is not there. The 318K form should be part of the documents that you collect for your medicals. It may be in the DOHMH website. if you go into the DOHMH website, they may have a copy of the 318K form, or you could either Google it. Just Google 318K form, and it may be there. So in that form, it speaks in the very top. It gives you, you know, you have to write the information pertaining to the child. Then you have to also write um, a person who may be responsible for the child other than the parent. So it's another person's name, their relationship to the parent, um, if the child, you know, their information such as telephone address. And then it asks you particularly the history of the family, and it asks you the history of the child. Has the child ever had head injury? Has the child ever been hospital, and for what reason? Has the child have any burns that we should know about? So in that form, it says everything. And at the very end of that, it gives you signatures. Parents have to sign to let you know, to attest to the fact that the very top portion of that form is complete. The second portion that they sign again is to give you permission to be able to transport this child to the hospital, and that medical attention can start. Remember, don't ever put a child in your personal cars. Never put yourself in that situation. Always call 911. And you know, the protocols to follow is also quite intense. To, you know, step by step what needs to be done. You should always have somebody at the front waiting for the ambulance, so that they know that this is where the child is. And you know, make sure that you escort them to wherever the child is. So there are protocols to follow when you do that. But that form is extremely important, along with the medical. In there, you also keep doctor's notes if a child was sick during COVID, if the child had COVID, um, if you had your, if children were given the immunization for. All of those things should be kept in that medical record. Make sure if you do take a child, that you also, once the parents get there, you could stay with them to be support to the parents, right? And to help them and ease them as well. But if it's not a very, very serious injury and the parent is all right, make sure that you collect those records with you, because I guarantee you they will get lost. So make sure you bring them back to the program, put them where it belongs, and then also follow up by calling the DOH, the DOE, your sponsorship, everyone that has to be called, you follow up. Now, the staff record. The staff record for me, and I'm telling you, this is extremely important. You know, when DOHMH comes to your site, that's basically what they ask you. Can I have your staff records? Can I have your children's records? So, what I did is I kept an individual folder for each of my staff members. I kept one in by classroom. So I had classroom A and all the teachers from that classroom, and I kept it in a particular order, because if I started like this, I continued. So I knew the second record of that particular classroom would be my assistant. So I would put my teacher, group teacher, my assistant, and my aide. Classroom B, I would do the same. Group teacher, assistant, and aide. Classroom C, and so forth. So I knew that in a pinch, I knew where my records were. And so I kept all of those, their personal records, like their hiring, their diplomas, their certificates, um, um, their three letters of reference, the pets, everything in that record. Then I had another, right behind that, I had my medical records. And my medical records, I did it the same way. I did classroom ABC, one, two, three, and I kept it in that same order. Every single teacher, the group teacher, the assistant, and the aide. And so anytime the teachers would bring me a medical note, I would just put it in their record. And you kept everything in order. Now, I did something different because I had a very good instructional coordinator when I was a young director, and she showed me how to maintain these records. And so what I did, every single record that was asked of me from DOH, I created a binder. Now, in my latter job, I had two programs. I had infant toddlers and I had preschool. And so these binders can get quite large, right? So what I did, I had one binder per program. And then I kept my records in a very orderly manner as well. It was just classroom ABC, one, two, three. And I would put again my teacher, my group teacher, my assistant, and my aide. And I kept my records. Every single record had the same process of following. I started by writing the name of the staff member and the date of hire. After that, so anything that you submit to DOHMH, you keep it. And what I did, I used to have the sheet protectors. So I would start with the the name of the staff. Then I had the sheet protector where I kept whatever it is I submitted to DOHMH. And then when that approval letter came in, I put it at the front. After that, I did a copy of their SCR and their Identigo. And then after that, I had, for those people who had DOI, that they did the Department of Investigation back then, I also put it there. And then I kept, in an orderly manner, I kept like their diploma, their transcript. I kept their three letters of references, and then I kept all of their mandated trainings that they had to do. And all of these things, I'm a little OCD. I made tabs for it. I made tabs for each and every one of what it was. So everyone had the same tab. You don't have to do it, but it made my life easier. So I did it because it takes a while to get this in order, but it does makes a world of a difference. When DOHMH used to come to look at my records, what did I do? Sometimes they do, depending on your licensing, right? They'll ask you, can I please have if your license is expiring, they'll ask you for your infant toddler license and they want all the records of the staff. I would give them the book. And how I followed this was very easy. I created a actual spreadsheet. I allocated for each of my classrooms, classroom A, B, C, I put it in order, right? Again, I did the group teacher, the assistant teacher, and the aide. There, I put on the very top, I put exactly, and Alex is going to share that. Alex, do you think we should open that document so that
Sure.
they can see it? It will make more sense to you so
Let's
that you
open it.
can.
Should we start with the employee tracking records, the staff
Yes,
one?
please.
All
Yes.
right. So here.
So you see in there, because there is sometimes when they ask me what is their date of birth, right? So I made sure that I had everything in one place. I put their date of birth, what program they belong to. IT is infant toddler, the date that they were hired. The A1 series, as you can see, is that was supposed to be every 5 years. You had to do this A1 series record, right? So I put the dates at the bottom. I also color coded stuff because I wanted to know if I needed to do something by a specific date. For example, on the very bottom, you see 2022. I had to review that 2022. You see, I put it 2022, and I knew that 5 years from that date, I had to do this record again, right? So, I mean, you do whatever you feel is it works for you, but this system always worked for me. When they used to come to my program, they would say, "Wow, Nixa, I this is wonderful. I don't have to." Sometimes, you give them a record, a folder, and everything is jumbled up in the folder. As much as you want to keep it in order, it just doesn't happen, right? So when I did my binder, I made sure that everything that's here is in the order that was in the binder. So they had to, and my tabs also indicated what it was that they had to be looking for. So let's go up to the top. The resume, you see, as you can see, the resume is there. And I would put to myself everyone who gave me the resume. Then Identigo, what was the day that these individual got fingerprinted, right? The SCR, when did I initiate it? And that's the initial SCR. And then if I have to follow up, this is the present SCR, right? Child abuse and maltreatment. Child abuse and maltreatment is very big. So this is when they initially gave me the first one on January 12th, 21, is when they gave me the first child abuse and maltreatment. And I put for myself, when is that due? So I know that every 2 years they have to do this training. And that's why I color coded, because I know that in the year 2023, I would look for all the blues because they were the ones that needed to be up to date on that given year. um, References. Did they have all three references? And the reason why I did that was, when you start gathering all your records together, people may give you things in drips and drabs, right? They don't give it to you all at once. They're waiting for people to comply with giving you reference. Now, I wouldn't put yes on that spreadsheet unless I had all three references. And that gave me the indication to make sure to always go back and look at that person's record to make sure I had all three references. Because more than likely, if I didn't put yes, that meant that they were owing me. So then you have to go back and ask that employee to please make sure that they comply with giving you the reference. Here is the SIDS. Now, if you have an infant toddler program, you needed to have this. Now everybody needs to have this. So it's every 2 years. Now there are many other trainings that you have to be in, all your staff has to be in compliance, including yourself, right? Because this is not only the classroom, but it's also your bookkeepers, yourself, your custodian. Everyone has to comply with this mandate. And what I would do is, because my chair was very high in my program, I would keep it behind my desk, right? And I would check it every month. At the beginning of the month, I would check to see if anybody owed me something, right? I would look for the dates, because even though it was 2023, there were many different dates within that year that people had to bring me something, right? So that's how I kept my records up to date. I also started putting it on my desktop. So I always made it a point that I would look at my desktop at the beginning of the month for this record, the employee tracking record. And then what I would do is I would make a note. I kept a notebook, and I made a note of everyone who owed me something. I made the distribution, and then I would tell them, and I would write it down. On this day, I told so and so that they owe me their child abuse and maltreatment. And then sometimes you have to go and remind them, right? So, but that keeps you in the know of what needs to be done. Now, I had another one for medicals. This was just for the mandates from the medical was a totally different one, and it had like all the immunization. It had during COVID a copy of the COVID vaccines. Um, they had And sometimes those medicals can be a little bit tricky because the doctor may complete the medical 1 year, when your staff started, and put everything that coincides with the medical, right, that you needed to be completed. For example, your MMR, your rubella, everything that, the height, the weight. But then when they continue to go to the same doctor, they don't put that information again and again and again. So you have to make sure that you have an updated immunization there as well. So you can put a copy of a medical that had all these mandated vaccines in the medical with your most recent medical, right? So you want to make sure that when somebody comes and they're checking your records, they see that it's there. Another thing is that, sometimes people don't know the acronyms for the individual, um, your individual vaccines, right? So when you're training your person that is left in charge when you're not in the program, you have to make sure that they know what this is, what they're looking for, because sometimes you may get a little slip from the doctor with the rubella, right? So if you don't know the acronyms for that, it's HIB or HBA something. I forget what it is. But you have to know, because sometimes the person who comes to see your records, even though you have it there, they would tell you, no, it's not there. But you have to, it is there. So people have to go through those individual um the clear, what was it that I called them, the protector sheets,
Yeah.
the protector sheets, and really look for it, please. But make sure the person who you leave in charge when you're not in the site, that they know what they're looking for. Because if they don't know what they're looking for, then you're going to get written up even though you had it there. So always make sure. So this is something that I did throughout my entire career. Every time I had an inspection, not to say that maybe I forgot somebody, but people see that you are making a huge effort. You're going above and beyond what you're expected to do, right? And they would tell me, it's okay, Nixa, if you could get it to me by the end of tomorrow or whatever, I won't write you up, because they see that you have it in track. There's, life happens. Sometimes you're out of the office because you may have a death in the family, or something, a family emergency or something like that. But if you have your records up to date in an order where people see that you made an effort to continuously have everything up to date, they more than likely will work with you.
Staff
Yeah.
medicals.
So there you see the staff medicals. Again, I wrote my staff that IT programs, the preschool programs, administrative staff, everything like that. Then varicella, that was something that was asked later on. It was part of the record that we had to maintain. At the beginning, they never asked us for varicella, but all of a sudden they said everybody has to have varicella. So I put it there and I put yes for everybody. If I say yes, that means it is in the record, right? The medical, the current medical. Now, medicals are due every 2 years. So I knew that these are the people who owed me medicals last fiscal year. That was 2023. And then I also put those that are going to owe me medicals in 24. Tetanus shot. Tetanus shot is every 10 years. And that's a big one. People don't follow this because you're not privy to it, right? So they don't follow it. So the tetanus shot, that's when they're given to you, the tetanus shot, a current date, and when they are due every 10 years, right? So that's what I put for my tetanus shots when they're due. Uh, wow. 30, 1927. A lot of my staff were new because after COVID, I had a lot of new staff. So that's why you see those dates so way out there every 10 years. So, and again, you see, I color code everything. I say the dates that they're due. So I just know for myself who needs what. And then down on the bottom, you could put your substitutes, people who are not always working at your program, but you still have to maintain their records as well. So if you develop some type of record keeping like this, and again, if you do a binder, it's so much easier because in the other medical record, you're going to have other documents. You could have maternity leave that staff has taken. You could have all the times they got sick for COVID. You don't need to give that to the DOHMH people. You just got to give them something like this and they'll see. There, I also put here, I put the COVID vaccines. I put a copy of their COVID vaccines in that binder as well. So these are systems that have worked with me for me throughout the years, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity of seeing how the systems um, may work for you, or if you have something else, that's fine as well. So that's what I do. I would put a name of a person, their last name, first name, and their start date. Now remember, for throughout the year, there are many reasons why people may ask you for a person's start date. It could be financial reasons, it could be a grant that is going to be given, it could be so many different things. And if you have these systems in place, you don't have to go digging through all your folders if you have a binder with all this information. This is meant for you to have your job a lot easier. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, you as the program director or as the family provider, you're out because you had an emergency. Somebody could take your place and continue to do this. It's very easy to follow. It's not something that is rocket scientist. You just look at it, you see it's right in front of you, and just continue to maintain it. And I guarantee you, if you keep these records in file the way I've shown you, or your own system, when DOE comes in to inspect, you will not have an issue. When you're going to do your licensing, you won't have an issue because everything is in its place. Another thing that I would do throughout the year, every fiscal year, I created an individual binder. And people would say, but Nixa, why do you have all this paperwork? We have everything in the computer, but when the people come to visit you and review your records, they're not going to sit and look at your computer. They want hard copies, right? They want to look through, make sure that you have what's mandated of them, right? So I started doing this after Miss Culpepper, who was wonderful. She taught us this, and I just went with it, and I expanded it, and I took it through all the systems. But from every fiscal year, what I would do is I would create a binder with everything that you're doing throughout that fiscal year. Now, that incorporates your staff meetings, your parent meetings. It could incorporate um, any flyers or communication that you have with your staff and your teachers. Um, Anything that DOE sends you to share with your families. I started doing that because I noticed that when I was doing my
Quality stars.
quality, thank you, the quality stars, when I was doing the quality stars, they were asking me for all this information, and I did have it in folders, but it took me a long time to get all those that information the very first time, and I promised myself that I would not do this again. So that's why every fiscal year I started putting everything in one folder. When I had my second quality star review, I had it there. I didn't have to go digging. I didn't have to go looking from folder to binder, giving them examples of all of my trainings to the staff, or the trainings that I did with the families, with how I maintained the medicals, how everything was there. It was so easy the second time around because it was there already. So again, this is something that we're reviewing with you because we want you to make your life a lot easier, a lot simplify, so that I mean, you wear so many hats in your sites and in your as family providers as well. Why not make it simple for yourself? Why not, take the middleman out? Make sure you train a staff member that's there, somebody that is in your representing you when you're absent, right? That they know, so that there's not it's not a secret. And these things I've shared throughout the years with my colleagues, because I felt it was important for us to all be in compliance. If you're working under one umbrella with various people, we want all of us to succeed. We want our programs to all be working. There's no selfishness here. It's sharing information, right? That's how we support one another. But we wanted to put this together so that we can give you support to make your life so much easier. Sometimes these resources, these are things that I have gathered throughout my career, and worked for me, and I hope that it works for you as well. So I thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week as well.